Okay, so okay, yeah, I have something to like to start with. Oh, no, not yet. First, can you tell us a little bit about how the whole family of throbbing whistle, psychic TV, Lady Chris and Crosby, how did it start?
I was in a collective that was called Coombe Transmissions with Genesis Peerage and Cozy Fanny Tutti. And we were doing performance art in galleries and...
Wasn't Chris in it too?
No. And traveling around doing performances, conceptual art performances in different places. And we were becoming very frustrated that the fine art world was very narrow, and it was only addressing certain kind of people that went to art galleries and not to young people generally, and not to the public at large. And so we decided to start making art pieces that were in the form of music, and to take some of the styles and some of the genres of rock, but to make sounds that were totally unlike that, and sounds that interested us in a subconscious way rather than in a musical way. None of us could play instruments. This was about a year before the beginning of punk, and we started really the notion that it was possible to be successful musically without knowing how to play your instruments. It's just that we never tried, whereas the punk groups tried to play three chords and tried to ape the conventions of the Ramones and people like that. And so it seemed to us that we started at the same time, but what we were doing was pure. What they were doing was tainted and was
retrogressive.
Retrogressive, exactly.
Just dressed in new clothes, really.
And we called our label Industrial Records. And consequence of that was really to start the industrial genre altogether, which was music that supposedly related to the urban landscape and used sounds from the sounds of industry and the sounds of machines and the sounds in the same way that the futurists had done in the 20s and 30s, but for a new audience.
I mean, I was as a fan at whatever age I was, like 14 or 15, to hear Throbbing Gristle for the first time. It was, I'd heard the Damned, I'd heard the Clash, and I just thought they were rock crap. I was never ever interested in rock and roll. And Throbbing Gristle, although they used guitars and bass and originally drums, but the whole aesthetic of it was to reflected the way my life was. I looked out the window and I lived on really boring estates and RAF council, blocks, and what they were putting into their music, lyrically and sound-wise, was so relevant to me that it blew punk out the window. It really did. And Peter invented the word, industrial. That he said industrial music for industrial people. And there was a sort of echo of the Warhol Factory, wasn't there, for Jen in that, and the music from the Death Factory and stuff. But they were confronting issues that none of the other bands were doing. The other bands were being dressed by Jasper Conran, the clothes designer. The Clash were, and it was all clothes orientated in the London scene, and it was horrific. And then Throbbing Gristle came along, and they were talking northern slang and used Throbbing Gristle as a northern slang expression, and just talking, using sounds that I could relate to as a disaffected youth. I sort of dressed as a punk, but I listened to Throbbing Gristle and I listened to Per Ubu, who I sort of had a sort of slight thing on the Residents, but Throbbing Gristle, but totally the one that really hit home for me. And from then on, I vowed to follow a similar course, and I connected it with William Burroughs, and I connected it with sort of Kurt Schwitters and Marcel Duchamp and all the few small books in the library at school. And I saw a connection between these things, that it was an art phenomena, but it was an art that you lived rather than their life was art and art was life. There wasn't a difference. And that really struck me very strongly and still does now. And this is what I hope we are doing now.
Was the way that Throb and Gristle used electronics different from any of the other bands that were trying to get industrial music?
Well, nobody else was then. I mean, Cabaret Voltaire and Collective Deviate became industrial because of their connections through Throb and Gristle. I mean, Cabaret Voltaire, if you strip it down, they were like, they're the seeds. They're a 60s garage band. But
certain aspects of our use aspects of our use of synthesizers that Chris Carter did, had reference to Kraftwerk, obviously,
or Tangerine Dream,
but those are basically the main two. But the way that we used them were different because we weren't attempting to make pop music. We were attempting to reach a far deeper current, and nobody really in the contemporary music, so-called pop music culture used tapes or sampling.
It was so subversive and it was only 10 years later that the journalists and the majority of the people understood how subversive that Throb and Gristle really were, and not just in ideas, but in the sound. When they were being ironic, there was more than one level of irony, and I picked up on that.
The thing that was exciting for us at the time was that it seemed like it was going to be possible to plug into a circuit or a current of the kind of disaffected youth and appeal to them in a way that was sort of pure and artistic without incurring any negative connotations of going to art galleries or education or any kind of culture that they might find, they might relate to older people and to things that had nothing to do with them. And so what we were hoping for was to appeal to people directly and bypass the whole kind of cultural system. And I think that to some extent that worked, obviously, in small.
And strangely enough, a lot of the media, the backlash you had at the time was that you were all art school people. That you'd all been to art school, which is complete nonsense, whereas most of the punk groups had all been to art school.
Yeah, the reverse is actually true. None of us had ever had any art education, really, was.
That just shows how clever that Throb and Gristle's camouflage actually was.
And how did the audience react?
Most of them were astonished. Some of them hated it, and some of them, the majority of people, catharsis has a strong attraction, and it's an attraction that Coil appealed to even now, and the similarities between a Throb and Gristle concert and a Coil concert of 2001 are very strong. There's a strong through line of appealing to the same sort of primitive fears and exhilaration and emotion. It's a white knuckle ride for the ears.
There's also tenderness at the centre of it, a vulnerability. We allow ourselves to be more vulnerable than the majority of musicians do.
But do you think that the ours also happens for the audience?
Yeah.
Oh, sure, yeah.
More for the audience than for us, because we do it every day, and so.
Well, we don't do it every day. And I disagree, actually. I find it very cathartic and quite grueling to do what we do, which is why we don't do it that often. And I have to be very careful about how I go into it emotionally and mentally, and how I come out of it emotionally and mentally.
What happened yesterday?
No, yesterday was fine. So my eye.
That's a different kind of catharsis.
Okay, no, okay.
But this is a week and a half old.
Already?
Yeah.
It's hard to do performing live for you.
Well, for me personally,
the thing about our live performances is that a percentage of them are pre-arranged and pre-organized so that we know that they're reliable, but another percentage is totally spontaneous, and it's quite difficult to be completely spontaneous to order. But and so it is actually quite taxing
There is no compromise with it.
It's not a question of giving a good performance of a song, and playing the right notes, and moving on to the next song and doing it day in, day out. Because each concert has a potential of being completely different. There'll be a certain structure that's the same, but the spontaneity and the improvised nature of it means that it can be quite emotionally draining.
I liken it to a sort of lightning storm. It sort of builds up over a long time, and you know it's coming, so you try and sort of work out where the lightning's going to strike, and then it strikes, and that's the concert. And sometimes, it may be slightly to the side, or it may be spot on. It just depends. But it's a discharge. It's a psychic discharge that we're aiming for, and we spend a long time creating.
It's a question on the side, but since you've worked with electronics a lot, for a long time didn't play any instruments or not really capable of playing instruments, how live is live? What you do? You play your mixer board, or you play your sequencer, or
Thighpaulsandra plays analog equipment. So the position of a knob is very critical to what comes out of the speakers. I mainly mix and do some vocals, and also play stuff on a Macintosh PowerBook.
More than half of it's live now.
As I say, the basic structure is pre-organized, but the actual form that it takes and the sound that comes out is spontaneous.
Yeah, completely, and also completely changeable. It's not a case of sort of DJs fading up and down. We have so many setups that we can feed in, depending on how we feel, and we will talk to each other on the stage, and say, look, let's take it in this direction or that direction. But Thighpaulsandra is a classically trained musician and an electronic musician expert. Simon can play, we can play, and I can sing and perform now. So
there are some John Cage pieces we're very good at, aren't there?
It's okay. And then after this progressive practically, can you say about especially the latest albums, like if you say Dreams Less Sweet? It also always sounds to me like a Coil album is.
So can I do a little bit on why did Touring Gristle stop?
Because of personal differences within the setup of the four.
I think personal indifferences, wasn't it?
Yeah, it just we weren't enjoying being together, and I think the thing about the kind of music that we do is that really the only way to change it, to change the sound of it, is to change the instrumentation. And we'd been through a number of changes within Throbbing Gristle with playing different instruments and stuff, and we just felt that it wasn't any fun, and it's got to be fun, no matter how horrific it is. It has to be fun as well.
It's like a riot can only last for so long, before it becomes choreography.
It's very wise said.
The voices. So then you and Genesis started Psychic TV?
Well, Peter and Genesis did first.
Originally, we wanted to not have a group. We wanted to have an organization that was going to make TV. That was the very first thing. It was called Psychic Television, and we were going to make...
Was that your phrase as well?
Yeah. And we were going to make, subversive underground TV shows and TV programs in order to carry on the message of what we were doing with the music to a different audience. The reason that didn't really work was because, number one, it's very expensive. And number two, at that time, which was like 80, 81, there was not any reliable distribution for underground TV. There would have been if it was now. There would a lot more. But
you may be forgetting what we were involved in. A couple. I think we only got up to about a couple of pirate television broadcasts. That from top of tower blocks in London, organised by a French guy who's now dead, unfortunately, called Claude Bessy, and we provided with some material towards those, and that was Psychic Television as a name was already there, but it was sort of pirate television as well, was one of the sort of things.
It have to do also with your experience with sleeve designs.
Sure. It was natural for me because the people that I was working with making sleeve designs for a kind of prog rock groups were at the same time moving into the beginning of MTV and making music videos. Yeah, and we made a couple of Throbbing Gristle live videos that pretty much were underground and before, it was conventional for that kind of band to make those things.
Well, you did long form videos.
Yeah, we did two. Yeah, we did two. If not more.
In fact, the only people, Factory Records are making videos for, a certain ratio and all that lot. Stockholm Monsters and stuff, they were spending about £5 on each video, just take them up on Ilkley Moor and point a camera at them. Whereas Throbbing Gristle and Peter, they were actually taking time to do long form videos, the sort of concepts and stuff, as well as recording some of the live concerts like that.
How did sound came about then?
The sound of Psychic TV. Well, we wanted to do something different, and one of the ways was to do that was to use a lot more acoustic instruments, and we were becoming more interested in the psychoactive properties of acoustic and Balinese and Tibetan types of instrumentation, and that was one of the things. And at the same time, we were making films that accompanied, those pieces of acoustic music that were much more ritualistic and fetishistic.
And magical.
Yeah. And so the first thrust of Psychic TVs as a musical entity was to try and, affect people using these more exotic instruments that they hadn't come across before, and, were not just bass and drums and guitar and so on. And at the same time, Genesis was interested in making some money. I wasn't really at the time because I had plenty of money, but he sort of convinced me that it was a good idea to try and take some kind of musical structure to a wider audience, and he sort of formed a relationship with Some Bizarre, and we went along that because some aspects of that scene, we had empathy with Mark Ormond and stuff like that, but I was never very particularly comfortable with the idea of doing arranged strings and stuff at that time, because it just it felt like a distraction to me from what was the core truth of what we were doing, which was to try and affect people, in a positive way, spiritually and emotionally. And making pop music seemed to me kind of a distraction.
It was a sort of difficult mixture that never quite... Well, there were the two strands that were weaving together. Genesis's pop sensibility, which he does have, he likes the Beach Boys, he likes Tom Rapp, Pearls Before Swine and Love and Velvet Underground, he has got a Lou Reed complex, I'm sure. And he works with Alex Ferguson on that, meanwhile David Tibetan, Sleazy and myself were sort of feeding in the esoteric elements and researching, all the sort of ritual musics of the world. And Hilmar Hilmarsson from Friend of the Sugar Cubes, and he's a film soundtrack guy. He was also feeding a lot of the magical content in. So this strange sort of black and white chocolate mix was sort of, was together for a while, and then like an emulsion, it separated and we left, basically.
Well, it also left for another reason, which was that Genesis was interested in, as part of the Psychic Television thing, we had a kind of offshoot called the Temple of Psychic Youth, which was intended to try and deprogram people from sort of spiritual cult groups, which we thought were interesting, but at the same time, were fundamentally evil and were limiting people's choice. And we wanted to try and provide a structure or a source of information on deprogramming so people could get free and become independent. I mean, independent just as much of the Christian church as any other kind of Jim Jones temple. And so, we started publishing manifestos for the Temple of Psychic Youth, and as with many of anything that looks like a religious movement, is that people tend to want, especially in England, I think people tend to like to be told what to do, and to be told that this person is the leader and that they have to do what they're told, really. And it's very English. I don't know, maybe it's Dutch too, but certainly in England, people like to be told what to do. So,
the whole thing was formulated and theorized and precisely worked out as a camouflage and a trap. And so when these people who wanted a leader or a cult and a religion to follow wrote in and started to do it, we would say, don't do this, do the opposite, do it for yourself. Unfortunately, Genesis took it on himself to become the leader, and he stayed the leader, Gary Glitter, leader of the gang. He got stuck there, and we were not happy with that at all, so we left.
Yeah, we weren't interested in being involved in a conventional cult. It seems small-minded and stupid and not interesting in any way.
And tedious and hard work and...
Well, all those stupid people wanting to be told what to do all the time, it's really a pain in the ass.
Yeah, I can understand.
So Jeff and I went off, basically, John and I went off and we...
We're interested in having followers, but we don't want to be leaders.
Can you explain why you were called John Balance? It's Jeff.
My real name's not Jeff. No, it is. My real name's Jeff. It's just a pseudonym.
It's to contrast to how unbalanced he is at some time.
I've got several others. Yeah. It's just easier when Jeff Rushton left Psychic TV and became John Balance, just to differentiate the two. And then I've got others. So what? Yeah.
He changes underpants.
I don't change my underpants. And when one persona gets tired, the other one takes over, hopefully. And it's different facets of yourself.
There are some characters in there you don't want to talk to, okay? Just don't address those guys.
I'm rather suspicious of people who don't have multiple names. Yeah.
Do you have multiple names? Or is it only Sleazy?
They're very submerged. I'm keeping them under control, okay?
If you mention their names, they'll appear, and then that's quite frightening.
Yeah. Then we have to do backward masking of
the
interview, right? Okay. But Coil coexisted together with Psych TV for sure.
For a short while, yeah, it did, yeah.
Was there any? How was that? Did you take things from your Psych TV work into Coil, or did you do the other way around? Did you try things that you did with Coil into?
The thing is that what we were doing was always ours, and not belonging to any band really. It was just what we were interested in,
You did Saskia as well.
I did Saskia, yeah. John Gosling, yeah. So I mean, there's another reason partly why we left Psychic TV is because we were doing so much work and research and sonically and ethnographic and researching different musics of the world and psychoacoustic stuff, scientific things, feeding it into psychic television and getting no credit for it. So and it was okay for several years as a sort of apprenticeship. And then I just thought, I personally thought, I'm not just going to do this anymore. I want recognition for my own work. So that's another reason why we left.
I've heard people say that you were the power vehicle for Psychic TV, aka Genesis. Like he was one waiting for you to release the audio tracks, so he could do his thing with it. Is that?
I don't think that's really fair, particularly. I mean,
Jen has his own personal, powerful path to travel. It's just that we weren't prepared to prop him up or feed it any further,
Okay.
Do you contact for Genesis?
No.
No. I've read that he got quite mad at you he blamed you with his exile.
It's complete nonsense.
We heard that he may have blamed us, but
utter nonsense.
The problems that he had were all of his own making. It's true that some of the problems were derived from the footage that we were shooting at the beginning of the 80s. but the reason that it was derived from that was because he was continuing to sell, copies of the tape. When I told him, that the law had changed and it was now illegal, and
he was also kept on showing them at the concerts.
That he should, that it was his responsibility. It's true to say that the tapes were powerful, and when the changes in the law happened in England, some sections of the tape were after that were illegal, but they were not illegal when we made them. And
It was only tapes.
it was him being whipped and tied up, and we had the police come to our house once, seriously, and said, he's looking at
It wasn't
John,
the police, it was HMS Customs.
who are responsible for pornography and stuff. And they asked him if he was a victim in a snuff movie.
Yeah, they said.
No, I mean, how stupid is that?
We believe this footage we have here
shows you being killed. Is that true?
Actually, it is. Maybe.
They did a terrible trick. Actually, they said that they were already been round to Genesis's house and he'd confessed everything. And
That's what they always say.
yeah, and then they'd said that to me, and then they went to Jen and they said that I'd already said it, and then that's
Kids, don't admit anything.
Is it the law that set the borders for you now, or
the law.
yeah?
No,
Well, as it happens, we're not interested particularly.
Were explicitly pornographic?
were we? In which way? Where?
In your lyrics.
Oh, that's okay. We can still do that now.
But you don't do that anymore.
Yes, we do.
Sometimes the reference is a little bit more subtle. I mean, we've never hidden the fact that John and I are gay, and that we're interested in breaking the borders of sexuality and just as much as other limits and borders, but we never really do anything to shock. The only things that we do are because we happen to be interested in them at the time.
We don't just say, "Oh, look, there's an area that we can go into to get attention."
So it wasn't also a political statement at that time in the early 80s?
It was, but not. We were what we were. We did what we did, and we knew the consequences of it. Yeah.
Does it still apply?
Yes. That was quite a bit.
If you read it.
All of it.
Microphone, please.
All of it.
Yeah, sure.
Coil.
Use this in my program, so.
Coil is a hidden universal, a code.
Wait a second, I'm going to request string close. You hear what I'm going to do next, so.
Coil is a hidden universal, a code, a key for which the whole does not exist, is non-existent, in silence and secrecy, a spell, a spiral, a serpent's ushed around a female cycle, a whirlwind, a double helix, DNA, electricity and elementals, atonal noise and brutal poetry. Coil is amorphous, luminous and in constant change. Inbuilt obsolescence, inbuilt disobedience, a vehicle for obsessions, dream cycles in perpetual motion. We are cutthroats, infantile, immaculately conceived, diseased. The virus is chaos, the cure is delirium. Coil are archangels of chaos. The price we pay for existence is eternal warfare. There is a hidden coil of strength, dormant beneath the sediment of convention. Dreams lead us under the surface, over the edge, to the delirium state, unchained. Past impositions and false universals, reassembling into our order. Coil, who has the nerve to dream, create and kill, while the whole moves and every part stands still. Our rationale is the irrational. Hallucination is the truth our graves are dug with. Coil is compulsion, urge, and construction. Dead letters fall from our shedding skins. Kabbalah and chaos. Thanatos and Thelema. Archangels and antichrists. Open and close. truth and deliberation, traps and disorientation. Coil exists between here and here. We are Janus-headed, plural, out of time, out of place, out of spite. An antidote for when people become poisons. Coil know how to destroy angels, how to paralyze. Imagine the world in a bottle. We take that bottle, smash it, and open your throat with it. I warn you, we are murderous. We massacre the logical revolts. We know everything. We know one thing only. We know nothing. Absolute existence, absolute motion, absolute direction, absolute truth. Now, here, us. Not knowing what is, and is not knowing I knew not. Hassan Isaba.
What do you feel when you read this?
Pretentious. No, it's.
I think it sounds good.
It's.
Did you?
Yeah. It's last night. That was last night. In a lot of ways, it still resonates for me. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the whole statement sounds Janus-headed. Sounds if like if you're flip-flopping between several.
Well, it's sort of it's attack and vulnerability at the same time. Yeah. It's surrealist. It's what I imagine the original surrealists thought. Time to.
If I look back with the knots, almost an instrument. At the beginning of the month, that is in there. En dat was een soort onbewust wachten. Ja,
En we heel af dat stedelijk museum, maar daar zijn 5 dicht gedefinieerd.
de marshal weer het voorbeeld.
Ja, dus wel in de kiesfilm altijd niets wat met het Van Gogh museum te maken is. Maar ik kan mijn best kaart al laten zien.
Nou, dat klopt.
Oké.
Als voor me keer.
Ja, nee, dat is misschien heel eens geweest dat er zo'n.
Ja, want zij vindt het misschien. Dat een museum bij ik inbeelden met als stiek.
We wilden ook echt daadwerkelijk een museum door. We zijn op een die station bij het daar.
Maar het zat veel heel snel veel op me zijn. Nee, ja, oké,
that was doing it, yeah. So what you were saying? Yeah, sorry.
It's well, I can't remember what I was saying.
The life is ambiguous, you know. It's very difficult to define everything in just one way. You know, what seems to be an inconsistency or an ambiguity is just light. It's just natural.
And I think it's important to have really high ideals, you know, and like that manifesto. I mean, it's, you know, I wrote it when I was young, and it's not perfect, but it sort of reflected a lot of what I felt passionately about, you know, and I missed out on for quite a few years through sort of drug abuse, and now I'm getting more focused again, periodically. You know, and I feel we have a sort of mission to continue the work that people like William Burroughs and the original surrealists did, you know, and William acknowledged this. He said, you know, that of all the people who've come to him to sort of have the William Burroughs tag or tattoo put on them, that we are the purest, you know, continuation of the current that he started with Brian Geisen and Ian Somerville and that lot, you know. Yeah, it's precise research on a psychoactive level and a psychic level and a magical level.
You told in interviews that you were strongly influenced by Aleister Crowley.
Yes.
Can you explain who he is?
Aleister Crowley. Well, he's called the wickedest man in the world, but that's by the newspapers, so dismiss that completely.
He was an English eccentric.
He was he started off very rich. He inherited a large amount of money and went to Cambridge, but dropped out of college and deliberately became a transgressive
academic
person. He decided to seek out and explore new sins, and to scandalize the society he found himself surrounded by, which he thought was awful and hypocritical and repressed. And his technique for doing this was using magic, sexual magic, and drugs, and anything that he could, and Occidental magic, and what he'd learned from the East, the Orient. He travelled in the East, and he brought this back and tried to start a sort of new church, as it was, the Church of Thelema. And he had disciples, and he was mad. He was deluded. He was a wife beater. He became addicted to drugs. But at the very core of him, he was an incredibly brave person, because he lived his dream. He lived the vision that he lived. He had a spark in him that was divine, and he acknowledged that every person had this. He said every man and every woman is a star. What he meant by that was that we should all aspire to be superhuman, not in a nation sense, although he was aware of that, but to live life to their absolute potential and not care a jot for what anybody else thought. If you wanted to dye your hair green and make love in the middle of the street with a dog, if the dog was obliging, then this is okay, But this is the bravery and the persistence throughout his life and all the things he went through. His magical motto when he joined the Golden Dawn was "Perdurabo," which means "I will endure," and he did. He was a seeker. Yeah, he wasn't a seer. He didn't actually see. He employed other people to do the visions, but have visions on his behalf, and he'd transcribe them. But what he was someone who could, what I'm not doing now, is articulate and write down in a Western way, in a way that was digestible to the Western mind at that time, sort of 1910 and stuff, which only did his magazine, The Equinox. Material that had really never been so precisely laid down. And he has a huge following now. Most of them are deluded, unfortunately. But again, there's a percentage who are carrying on. I don't follow anybody really. No. I study, and I take away what I need.
You with Coil do the same thing as Crowley in these days?
Partly.
I hope so.
I'd like to be seen in sort of in that tradition.
Is it the endurance that
Yeah.
strikes you the most?
Yes. Yeah.
If you look back now to the period of Coil, since you've been around such a long time, most of those groups are software.
Yeah.
Can you feel at ease with the endurance showing?
Absolutely. I mean, is it on here? One of our phrases, yes, persistence is all. This is deliberately chosen. This is another magical motto that one of the OTO, one of Crowley's church followers had. And I think it's so relevant to Coil now, and to myself, and to the people who, we're working with. We persist throughout whatever. We're not interested in trends, not interested in fashions. We're not interested in, we may dip into, we may be like a particular thing, but they come and they go. Whereas we just continue doing what we do, and it all washes over us. We have a pure core that is very, very strong, I think.
A little bit for the history part, so to say. Suppose how to destroy angels.
Male sexual energy, yes.
And that's scatology. Could you tell us a little bit, maybe now from the perspective we're talking right now, the injuries thing? How was Coil at that time? What was special in the way the album was recorded?
Scatology was recorded totally on a Fairlight, which was new to us because, a few people like Yes had them,
Kate Bush.
but it was unknown for somebody in an underground band to use them, and it certainly is a great experience for me because it's a totally new way of writing and a totally new way of using sound, and in many ways that instrument has never been, replaced. It did stay stuff that was unique then, and it's sort of unique today, although you can do it in different ways.
Can we just say that if anyone has a Fairlight, what
Fairlight 2 we want, don't we?
Yeah, if anyone has, yeah, we're very interested in buying one.
Okay.
Yeah,
Put it on the net for you.
please.
So that was a great tool, and what we always from a sort of technical side, we're always looking for tools that will do things that no one's done before. Yeah, we had an emulator later, yeah, but the first thing was made on a Fairlight, and in fact, Horse Road was made mostly on a Fairlight too. So we take great delight in kind of taking technology that's designed to do one thing and using it in a totally opposite way and making it do something that the inventors never imagined was possible. But in fact, it makes sounds that are totally new for people to be stimulated by. So that was a great thing for me, was to do that and make songs that were totally made up of the sound of a Polaroid camera, ejecting the picture, combined with a music cassette of a 12-year-old boy being hit with a stick. And then there was one song that was just that was the only sound I think that was only pretty much in the.
But a sampler wasn't designed to do anything. I guess at that time.
Now, when people made samplers subsequent to the Fairlight, I mean, they made the Fairlight. It was made in Australia.
Yeah.
To be like a high-tech version of a
Orchestra.
Yeah, that's right.
the mellotron. It's basically like designed to replace the mellotron because mellotrons were notoriously unreliable. So bands like Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer were using a Fairlight on stage basically just to play strings or drum sounds, and just because they didn't want to buy an orchestra, they didn't want to take an orchestra on tour. But as soon as you start putting in sounds that are taken from live, from the real world, you can, as make music. Everybody makes it now, but in those days it was totally new. It
was an oral equivalent of William Burroughs' cut-ups in a way. Yeah.
So that was exciting for us, and we continue to do that now with different kinds of technology, with Pro Tools and plugins and stuff. Taking it, equipment or software that's designed to do one thing and using it in a totally different way.
Scatology studio-like album, like that you did the songs, and we used an equal amount of time for polishing sound, mixing it, or is it something that, as a catharsis, was thrown out and well, this is it?
Yeah, like that. Yeah, we didn't really mix it as such, did we?
No.
It was just basically sequenced in Fairlight and laid off to tape, and we hired a Fairlight. We actually hired one, and we put it in one of our bedrooms in a little flat, and we did the vocals on the stairs. And
Was there a concept before you began recording?
Just a reservoir of stuff that I'd built up since leaving Psychic TV, and it was sort of some of the stuff that I did, had resented giving to Genesis because, we'd get no credit for it. So after
the concept was the scatology was about finding gold in shit, really.
It was alchemy. It was
the alchemical aspect of it, but also the fact that one person's shit could be gold for another person and vice versa. You know what I mean? It's just taking that whole area and looking at it in different ways.
And this is where the symbol for Coil is a black sun. We've changed it several times, but it's always a black sun, and that's the alchemical parts. And the magical thing is, when you go into this, it's called Nigredo. No, I don't know. Yes, Nigredo, and all these really are sort of to do with sort of pestilence and the spoiler and murderous tenderness of wolves and panic.
Alsjeblieft. En ze gaat over 15 minuten zouden uw workshop zich gaat uitgaande bezeten.
We can just continue for say 10 minutes and then we have to. Okay, but in remix,
Gentlemen, the third hand showcase. This museum will be closing in 15 minutes. You are kindly requested to go to the exits.
thank you very, very much. But you've just let's finish this part. But you've recently remixed.
No, remastered.
Please to 50.
You did
Japanese.
Yeah.
It's that. Well, please. Is it open to me? Get out of it.
No, it's been remastered.
We must just be.
Yeah.
It's basically the same record, but the sound. It's going to be 15 minutes of different languages in the
Yeah, it was this. Yeah, yes. So Coil is very multilingual.
Yeah.
And was there a concept behind horse?
Death. Yes.
Well, it was the beginning really of AIDS, and a lot of our friends were beginning to die, and the single that we took from that record was the first.
This is untainted. That was
Yeah, but it came between the two.
yeah.
It was the first record actually to donate money to AIDS charities, as far as I know. And the video for "Tainted Love" was a big caused a big outcry in America because they felt that people were taking advantage of AIDS victims, but at the same time, it was totally the opposite. And it's now in the Museum of Modern Art in New York.
Yeah, everyone says that. Yeah, it's so special that they bought this copyright.
Yeah. But everyone around us, a lot of our friends and sort of quite important associates were dying or had friends who were dying, and we knew we saw the consequences of what was happening with what didn't even have a name. It was called GRID back then. Yeah. And we decided, okay, this is happening, but let's explore death in all its aspects, and some of these are quite celebratory explorations of death. Like we went to Mexico, and there they have huge bands and Festival of the Dead. So that's really the death album.
Is that the way you work for your albums? You start with a concept, like exploring.
It's sort of
It depends. So it doesn't usually start with the music. It starts with something.
It starts with the
an image or
ideas.
an idea. Yeah, generally, yeah. Because we don't. Thighpaulsandra creates music all the time, consistently, without stopping, and frequently
24 hours a day.
He needs concepts.
He never sleeps.
And places to put it and places to expose it. But we tend to never do anything at all until we have an idea that drives it. So sometimes we don't record music for 6 months.
I personally can't start a piece of music unless I've got a title and an idea. So unless Peter...
Sometimes the title changes, but generally there's some kind of kernel or seed of an idea. Yeah.
It's as if the song exists already somewhere, and I have to find it, or we have to find it.
In fact,
and bring it into this dimension.
the record that we did called Time Machines that we have to get you a copy of is a much pure electronic record. It's just tones, and that was a record that we felt existed for millions of years before we brought it out onto a CD. It didn't exist as a recording, but it existed in the ether. And generally, that's the way that we feel about our music.
We're still not quite finished in the wall, so what then to I suggest we go back to the hotel maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. Lobbies?
They can turn the TV off, yeah.
Yeah, is that okay?
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. We talked about a horse rotivator and scatology, and about maybe the differences between the albums. No, we didn't talk about that. Is there any difference? You told us about the AIDS theme with horse rotivator, and that you have a concept or try to have a concept with every album. So how about the singles and the 12 inches and the compilations, and is there any approach to that?
No, not really. They're just mopping up collections of ideas and tracks done for other people. It's good fun, and it's sort of different discipline to be commissioned. You know, someone says, "Will you do a track for my compilation?" The concept is darkness or something. So you just do, you do something away from something that you would consider that might go on an album. You know, things that are destined for Coil albums proper. We tend to get a bit more precious about and a bit more rigid, and it's often more fun to just suddenly just let loose and do something spontaneous.
That's one of the reasons why we started to do different projects like Time Machines or Black Art District or Elf, is that after 10 years of making Coil records, it became a bit of a responsibility, and we found that we were getting stuck in being too careful and too...
The next monolithic, important to us Coil album, looming ahead.
There's an album called Backwards that we recorded. Well, we did a lot of recording for it at Trent Reznor's studio, and we stayed in his house for a month and recorded over there, and we've never released it because we never were satisfied that it was good enough. And that we've been working on those recordings for 10 years, but
it became overburdened with its own self-importance and its importance to us and to the so-called American audience that we were sort of consciously and subconsciously trying to aim for, and it's a bit of a albatross around our neck now. So we're gonna scrap it and redo it.
We probably will use elements.
Yeah, well, there's great bits in there, but it's not the next important Coil album.
Mm. So is it it's maybe a little bit dull to say, but is it maybe like having a different brand for every experiment that you try to do? I mean, is it a way of not trying to deal with the responsibility to release the new Coil album? Is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, it's like that guy.
Yeah.
It's also because we have so many diverse ideas. People expect Coil to be a vaguely particular thing, similar thing, and we've got such diverse ideas. And when we bring different personnel in, it becomes even more diverse and further away from what a Coil album might be perceived as, or what we perceive a Coil album to be, that we have to retitle it. So it's much better to present it as something different. Our ideal situation is to do an album under a different name and not even say that it's us at all. I get quite annoyed when we do a Time Machines album and it says Coil in adverts and the press. It's Coil present Time Machines. It's not. It's Time Machines. It's Time Machines by Time Machines or whatever. It's a completely different thing. Just happens to have similar personnel.
But then the reason they didn't put that is because they know they're going to sell more copies.
Yeah.
It's a trap. Yeah. But we did in fact say Coil present Elf on one of the things, and then it was Elf. But Elf was Elf. It wasn't Coil.
It's not called Coil presents Elf.
No.
Elf.
What was Elf?
Elf was... I genuinely believe it was a transmission from Sirius, to tell you the truth. It was, the whole thing came through us for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, and it was as if, again, the music was presented to us, and we were just there to sort of turn the knobs and make sure the levels were correct. And
that happened in your studio at home?
Yeah.
Could this happen in another studio as well? Something special, magical, maybe about your...
Not for Elf. In fact, Elf... I mean, Stockhouse... I didn't know this at the time, because I honestly was completely ignorant of Stockhouse until I met Thighpaulsandra, and Simon taught me more. But there's this myth, this idea that, rather than not a myth at all, I think it's truth, that Sirius is sort of broadcasting to us, and a lot of his music is based around Sirius, and his mythology and his ideology and his spiritual beliefs, are to do with Sirius, the star. And we, at the same time, we were calling our music sidereal music, which should be appertaining to the stars, but also to an artist called Ossian Spare, who was a magical artist, and he would do paintings that were sidereal, meaning sideways, askew, and the music with Elf was sort of twisted as a phase-wise and all sorts of spinning, rotating tricks that we could do. I'm losing the thread here. What was the thing? But Elf exists on. Well, that's the thing. We're waiting for another transmission from whatever Elf entity was. Yeah. So we're gonna. What I'm hoping to do is to write to Stockhausen and ask him to give us some sort of small mandala or a little drawing or some trigger, so we can reconnect with that entity, because I'm sure that he's in contact with it much more than we are.
He actually agreed to be an honorary member of Coil the last time we met.
At the Sonar Festival, yeah.
Stockhausen?
Yeah.
And complex, really.
He said a collaboration would not be impossible.
Because I'd like to confront you there with another saying of Stockhausen, because he was asked once what he thought about the techno thing, the whole new developments in electronic music, and he said, those guys are just too lazy. We've been working for 20 years to find out the right sounds, and these guys are just lazy. They don't
Repetition.
Well, I totally agree with him. Totally agree with him.
Okay. Then we have a good strong point. So how come?
It's it's like we were talking about Thunk. Thunk's a great program, but I said it's not very controllable, and you said it's not controllable at all. And that's true. That it's okay to use computers as a source of inspiration to make new sounds from. But the thing that makes a difference between a work that has resonance and meaning and artistry in it is the choices that people make about where to make an edit or how to set a filter or what order to put sounds in. And the vast majority of so-called techno artists, are not actually, either they're not making choices at all, they're relying on the computer to generate the music, or else they're making choices that are based, in genres that are already dead.
Such a well-worn form.
The thing is it's the whole techno genre is really, the majority, I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but the majority of techno genre is hedonism. It's a hedonistic genre, whereas electronic music, which breaks away from that, is that there's intellectual and spiritual and psychic extensions and differences and interlacings and stuff.
But don't you think that maybe one typical thing of the techno, of course the hedonistic thing, you're saying the word I was looking for. The other thing is maybe that they're creating functional music. So to them, maybe it's not important whatever source lies underneath. They just do it for the function of the sound.
Sure, it's to have an effect on the human body.
Yeah, wave their hands in the air like that. Just don't care.
Yeah.
We don't mind people waving their hands in their air, but we want them to care as well.
Yeah. Okay. Of course, I understand both sides to the discussion.
I have no objection to techno music. I'm just not very. I was massively into acid house originally.
Yeah.
But now, apart from some really clever programming like Ortega or Aphex Twin, when he gets his arse into gear, very rarely, but when he does, is genius, and he has listened to Parmigiani, he listens to Eric Satie, I know he does, and when he reflects that in his music, then it's interesting. But when he's just going for the floor and all that stuff,
that's you mentioned Parmigiani. I spoke to him last year, and that's
good night.
That's good. I have it on there. But I spoke to him in Melbourne last year, Parmigiani, and asked him about what he thought about this techno thing. And he says the same thing as the French guy. What's his name again? Oh man, I'm so bad with names. But he said it's quite the opposite of what Stockhausen said. He said, well, there's these people need to find their own sounds and have need to find their own problems with sounds. You know, of course, we used to work with machines that were not all too easy to handle. They have like, well, sky's the limit, so they need to build in limits, and that's their goal. You know, so he has a much more open idea to. So I thought, well, maybe for an older guy, because Parmigiani is close approaching 70 now. He was very open to this idea, and Stockhouse is like, it's turning away. You know, so don't come even knocking on my door. I don't want to talk to you guys. You know, so
It was very friendly to us.
yeah. Well, that's something that's astonishing.
I mean, where's it?
Not very easy to handle.
I think it rather depends what day you catch him.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, he played the first day of the Sonar Festival, and once he knew what was happening, and he did know that there was raves and techno artists and electronic stuff, and he was really upset that he had to leave. He wanted to stay for the whole festival. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So he maybe got his turnaround over there.
Yeah, but he's busy. You know, you see, he has a life plan. You know, he's going to continue with his series of works until he dies. So he hasn't really got that much time to sort of explore these genres or the consequences of these genres, or, you know, have loads and loads of acolytes turning up saying, "Will you listen to my techno tape, please?" You know, he's too busy. He's on a mission.
It's very difficult when you get people sending tapes and CDs. Would you like to listen to my thing? That, you know, we get 4 or 5 a week, and it's just impossible.
I mean, we'd love to listen to them, but we really haven't got the time. And I don't want to, not saying that I don't want my ears not polluted is the right word. Not because it's bad. I just don't want to have to listen to all these things.
Like the struggling with first steps.
Yeah.
It's hard enough just to listen to the things you want to listen to.
Yeah. I know.
What kind of music do you want to listen?
Well, it's how they ever have time to listen to, but when we do have time, what do we listen to?
What was maybe the last?
I'm back on time.
You be quiet.
I'm very quiet.
But you did to Madonna. Like
Worse.
okay. No, but what's maybe the last CD or a record that you remember saying, "Wow, this is good stuff," or "This is something to remember," or maybe play again?
Oh, there are load. There's several.
What are those ones off that
Well, the
radio show that we like?
The what?
The ones off that radio show we like. Late night.
Yeah, there was a. I'm not sure what it was called. It was just
Basque music, isn't it?
There's this amazing Basque music, sort of absolute extraordinary stuff. Sort of, it sounded like electronic music, but it's in fact percussion and guitars and some really.
She gone.
There's that.
Jude's harp.
Yeah, and this
I know this really.
Spirit dog.
yeah,
It's amazing. It's really devastating words, magical.
yeah, incredibly intense. I mean, Basque is a very strange experience all over. And there was another thing we heard that was music from the Arctic Circle. So that sort of started in Norway and gone right over to wherever you end up. Sort of,
Inuits.
yeah,
You play those Herman Niche records quite a lot, yeah.
a little bit. Herman Niche, organ musics, and Parmigiani and Francois Bale and
So the listening say to
Arno Peeters.
So that it sounds more classical and epic.
Yeah.
So you're not into say the new Aphex Twin gig or anything. Such a thing.
We listen to them to be aware of them, but not for pleasure really so much.
How do you like the glitch music?
Well, I was slightly annoyed by it.
Been there, done it. Yes.
Yeah, there was the latest issue of, what is it, Computer Music?
And
Had the whole piece about glitch music, and it seemed to me that they should have mentioned our record called "Worship the Glitch," but they didn't.
I mean, I sort of coined the phrase "worship the glitch," and this is where glitch music came from.
I was a bit annoyed by that. But we have a piece on that CD.
Oh, they all say the word glitch came out of a Wire interview. A journalist at the Wire was interviewing all those German guys doing glitch, Milpatel scene, A music stuff. Oval, right? And he was talking about the glitch, using glitching music, glitches, and they say that they got the word from there. But then now,
Where was that interview?
good question.
was like 6 months after our record called Why Didn't We Learn?
Why I was more than aware of.
Why you keep short of Arno knew exactly what the record was. Who knows? It doesn't matter. It's a current.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm not going to have a fight over it.
Maybe on stage.
I might.
But there's not no music.
Not really.
I know. I love the first Oval record.
Yeah, File's great.
Yeah.
First one. Like obviously.
I don't know. Whatever the first one was. I sort of not so good on titles, but what? And then what?
But is there any music that you've listened to what is inside the parameters of Coil, maybe, that you say, well, these guys are getting closer?
Not interested in copyists at all. It really turns me off.
I mean, you listen to Boards of Canada and stuff.
Oh, I mean, yeah, Boards of Canada. If I think about it really hard, there are quite a few people, like Richie Devine and Boards of Canada, who, they're immaculately crafted records with a very sinister but amazing magical quality to them. They actually quite frighten me, even though they're incredibly gentle.
Canadian band you like?
I don't like them. I wouldn't go on the record as like them. I'm going back in music. I'm listening to Lamont Young stuff, I'm trying to research, some Tony Conrad, although that's so badly recorded I can hardly listen to it. I'm trying to sort of find my place in history, so that we can go further and do a new direction. Because it's only now that a lot of stuff that is being uncovered, and so it's already been done. So that now it's up to us to pick up the baton or whatever and take it further. Same way as we're trying to do with the legacy of William Burroughs and his ideas to do with the cut up and electronic revolution and the actual theories behind what he did, rather than actually, the texts and the fact that he was a gentleman junkie and stuff. It's the spiritual and magical aspect of his work that we want to continue in music.
And it's also something, I guess, that has to do with experience, since a lot of the young artists now, they think that techno music and house is their roots, but your roots are like early 80s.
Yeah.
And so, of course, you're trying to find a bigger scope now.
Sure.
The new generation is just, well, they have like a history span that's this short.
Sure. Really short. Yeah.
They think they'll find the wheel again, It's annoying somehow to you?
No. I mean, it could be. It could be, but we just walk a few steps back and watch it happen. You just watch the wheel turn, and then this is why persistence is all, and time machines. We're trying to get back to this, eternal music that Lamont Young refers to, and tap into that. It's always going to be there. It was there since prehistory, since man made music or even sang vocally. That has been there, that magical resonating human quality of spiritual music.
Or a case of just tuning into it rather than anything else. It's like it's always there.
Yeah, nothing. It's a very constant factor.
Yeah, it's in the ether.
Trends.
Yeah, I mean, it's not to say that we won't play around with trends, because that helps sell records, it helps entertain us, helps entertain our audience, and it just helps.
I've got a question about it, since I've heard that you create commercials, or maybe used to create.
Peeters.
It's just you?
I used to do it, I don't do it now.
Used to direct them, didn't you?
Write the music and everything.
So how does that combine with the, almost complete opposite way of working?
I thought for a while that it was interesting to infiltrate the system, but I now think that the system is so corrupt, it's actually
not worth
infiltrating. And it's worth doing those things for money sometimes, but not anymore for me. You're basically It's like an less interesting form of prostitution. I don't really get into it.
I think
Was hypnosis your first attempt to infiltrate?
Yeah, pretty much.
And that went on to...
I went on till 81, and then we started a film company that started to do music videos when MTV started. And we did. Don't think that the films that I did with that company were commercials. The commercials I did basically with my own company later. But it's not interesting, you can make hundreds of thousands of pounds doing it, but it's boring.
What kind of music videos did you do?
9 Inch Nails and Rage Against the Machine and all those kind of bands.
Henry Rollins.
Music videos for a while, music videos, it was possible to do something interesting because the record companies didn't have such strict criteria about what they needed. But in the last few years, the record companies have become more and more narrow in their vision, and the only really the only thing people want now is a Tommy Hilfiger commercial with a different sheen, a different surface. And I'm not really very interested in doing that.
Following discussions about showing the nipple or not, stuff like that.
Whether it's this denim jacket or that denim jacket is not creative for me.
But did it buy you a nice studio?
Yes. Okay. And a big house.
Well, it's pretty damn important too. I mean, don't you think that it's very difficult for artists that have maybe 1 or 2 commercial successes, that if they don't have something to fall back on, they need to somehow take in account the commercial success of their own music, since else they don't get any money, so they can't continue to make music. Do you think that maybe you got lucky this way, that you got off on a good start, or don't you portray it that way?
I think that I was lucky that I had a source of income that didn't, apart from the time and the sacrifice that John had to make as a consequence of me being away working, that didn't interfere with my judgment about the music. And so the Coil has always been separate of any commercial considerations. We've only ever done music because we wanted to do it, because we felt that it was right. And the problem that people who have commercial success find is, as you said, that they want to continue having commercial success, and so they compromise their music in order to either repeat the format of what was successful, or to somehow create for a specific audience. But Coil has never had that consideration, and so it's totally pure, which is a tremendous luxury for us.
And what about the Snow remixes? People were whispering that Coil is going at it now. They're going with discs and remixes and another remix and yet another remix.
That was an example of a time, when we thought it was funny to, use the format that was prevalent at the time and try and manipulate it and try and do something different.
Tap into it.
Yeah. I mean, with that done, although they were remixes that were done, because it was funny to do that, they weren't done in order to be hits. They were just done in order to take a style and see where we could go with it. I think it's too hard to try and be original and commercial. If the majority of people, by and large, have relatively conservative tastes, and so if you want to sell a record to the majority of people, it's going to have to be within some kind of commercial conservative parameters. That just follows, it's logic. So it's much more interesting for me to be on the edge, to be, pushing at the frontier, and maybe slowly everybody else is going to follow, maybe in...
I mean, I'm very happy to sell 100,000 records, and I hope we could. I wouldn't compromise a single thing, towards the finished product in order to make it happen. If it happens, it happens, and I'll be very pleased. But
was also you expecting that you were not use the knowledge that you had from the commercial business to apply to Coil, but just the opposite, to use to drain their money and use it to have some sort of confident backbone to just be able to create whatever you like.
Well, we have been doing that, yeah, for sure. But I'm not interested in doing it now because the constraints. I mean, I always wanted some freedom within the making videos or whatever, you know, just in order to be able to bring some kind of intelligent contribution to it. And now it's pretty much impossible to do that. You know, there is very little intelligence in videos now.
The whole business is cretinized completely.
As well as commercials.
In commercials, there are very few, you know, good opportunities to be creative and to find situations where the opportunity for creativity and the creative people happen to be at the same place at the same time. You know, there is always a few commercials that stand out as being memorable, but there are so many people chasing such a small number of opportunities, and so much time has to be invested in the relatively small chance of success of getting to that right place at the right time.
Yeah,
that it, to me, is not a good investment. I mean, last year in videos, you know, I spent probably 150 days last year writing pitches for jobs for videos, and got 2, you know, which, you know, didn't make very much money. They made, I don't know, 20 or 30,000 pounds, and it didn't justify the amount of time that I was spending. And the opportunities for doing good things are just so limited.
So this is the strange thing now, is we've come full circle in that the ideas. I mean, I occasionally contribute ideas for Peter's treatments for videos, and 3 or 4 months later, I'd see my idea in somebody else's video, or we'd see our ideas in somebody else's video. And so now we've gone back and we've decided to do fine art objects and pictures and paintings and 3D pictures and installations. So if they want to steal from us, they're going to have to go to us, to the actual source. So it's sort of,
does it happen?
No, it's sort of, so we've gone right round to the beginning of Coombe again. To what they were reacting against, we are now taking up. Do you know what I mean? But we've been forced to do this because our ideas were being stolen so much. So we may as well present them with the actual objects and make them pay for it at source.
Yeah, it would be nice.
Yes.
Okay, I have 2 specific questions. Do you have any questions left? Well, one question is about the drugs. So maybe personal interest I have. I was wondering, I know for a fact that different drugs create different ways of perceiving sound or handling sound.
Yeah.
Could you comment on that? How you maybe in relation to drugs did different things, or just didn't do different things? Or...
No. Well, during Horse Rotivator, we're taking so much speed that we've got to put bass in. You tend to do that. With Adrian Sherwood Productions, it's all top. You have to be careful what drugs you use. I don't know. I mean, I'm aware of the phenomenon and I know what you're talking about.
For us, it's very difficult to separate, really, the effect of the drugs and the effect of the music. For example, on Time Machines, there are 5 or 6 tracks, and the names of the tracks are all the names of drugs, the names of molecules, MEO, DMT, etc., etc. And so, I'd say I can't recall ever particularly taking drugs in order to make the music seem different.
No, that's not what I mean. I mean, I can imagine, especially if you're behind the mixing board and you take an acid tap or whatever, that maybe the sound will come out of the speakers, and that if you're mixing it, you feel like you're sculpting the sound almost. But I can imagine that with another drug, like speed or something, the sound is like maybe picking you up or doing something physical with you. And so every drug should have, I guess, another, the way sound will reach your ear and work in your brain will be different with every drug you take. So I could imagine that you've been working on a track and maybe take another trip from another drug and then think, well, the beauty of this track is now gone, or it's different now, or I should take it in another direction. And it's very hard to explain if that ever happened.
We honestly don't. Well, Love Secret and Main was one album where we were taking large amounts of ecstasy and speed. And that's why that record is so sort of twisted and convoluted and rushy and strange. But since then, we actually haven't, we don't record on drugs. You know, because you have to keep a clear head. But obviously we have a drug memory.
Yeah.
You know.
You don't leave those places.
I know all too well.
Yeah.
So it comes back with you as well.
So we'll say, oh, you know, perhaps this track should do this particular thing, or may, you know, this is for the stoners or whatever. But you know, when we did Time Machines, we were talking about the Harmaline B ring, which is like when you take DMT, you have a sort of crunching sound. And if you take psilocybin mushrooms, there's a high-pitched noise. Yeah, and that's what we were attempting to reproduce in sound. So you didn't need to take the drug. You had a sort of reference point that took you to the place that the drug took you with the sound. You know, it was a sound drug rather than a chemical drug.
And that's the same also with the videos that we make now, is that you don't necessarily need to take the drugs. It helps if you've experienced them in the past, so that you know the references. But hopefully, you'll see that the images will in some way have a bearing on what you may have seen in the past in drug situations. But when we actually record, I think we nearly always say totally straight, because you need to have your instincts sort of attuned as much as possible. Yeah. And any kind of drug, it's like coke or something, it's going to reduce your faculty of...
You become insular. Most drugs create an insularity of some description. They create a tunnel of sound and vision. And for our albums, that's not right.
Did you always think about this way?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, remember, Love Secret and Main was the last album we did while we were taking lots of drugs.
But we deliberately took lots of drugs in order to make it convoluted and twisted and multi-layered.
Yeah. But that was 10 years ago, and we don't really do that anymore. No. And if we take drugs now, it's just for other reasons, so it's because we want to imitate somewhere else. Mm. But not to
totally recreate.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, because I can imagine some of your fans maybe pick up on this the very wrong way, since they think, well, it's okay to take lots of whatever kind of drugs and to just be spaced out all the time, since you could also use it as a very creative input to, well, monitor yourself or get in touch with deeper parts of yourself, since the Indians do this and many cultures do this, but the Western culture is about the only culture that just does it for recreation and tries to go over edges all the time. So I was wondering how this really, but now you're saying, so you don't use drugs when you record it. If you listen back to your own music, do you discover different layers in the music on different drugs, or is it too specific?
To be honest with you, I very rarely listen to our own records.
Okay, then this could be listen to them.
Just because you listen to them so much when you're making them, you have really had enough of them by the time that they're finished.
Okay. There was a time when we do an acid test, wasn't there?
We used to do that. We used to do that, yeah.
With the first two albums,
if not three,
we tried the different combinations of drugs to see if the album was mind expanding as we hoped, and if it wasn't, we'd go back and readjust it. Yeah, but we don't do that anymore.
I was looking for that one. Yeah. So, but it's not general standard practice.
It's not now.
Okay. But other people want to do that. It's okay. I think it's okay to say, that if people want to listen to our records on drugs, then it's fine. But
listening is different from creating.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, but they are intended to expand your mind,
whether you're on drugs or not.
Yes.
That was also with acid.
Yeah.
How was the first music that you could dance to 6 hours straight without losing any time? Your music was the drug. How cliche it sounds, but okay. Well, the other question now, finally, Ellen, 2 members about We're really sorry about this.
Never prepare and will be.
Of course, about the concert tomorrow. Can you explain a little bit? Of course, you have to imagine now the people in the show will listen to the recording of the show. So what are we going to listen to? Can you already foresee a little bit what the plans are? And maybe you can both introduce yourself and tell a little bit about what your part in the show is. Okay, hit it.
Go with Thighpaulsandra. Go.
What is our part in the show?
Okay.
We're not set up.
You don't need to, but
The thing is, we have a psychic communication between us. There was lots of conversation going on there.
Just to speak.
Microphone.
I'm listening. I'll play the tape backwards and try to find.
I'd pick someone and then raise it out.
I could also make it a different setting and say, how is it to work with Coil? Could also do it like that. So there you go. So okay, well,
what's human working with Coil? Since 98, 98. And so in the last 3-4 hours,
there you.
Just the last year, really. Last year or so.
So you're a rookie.
But we've known each other for a long time. We lived together.
It's almost more important for us that we have people that share our vision and understand a little bit about the feelings and the ideas behind what we do, rather than just have the ability to play or something.
Yeah.
As it is, Thighpaulsandra is a very competent musician, and obviously that's an advantage. But the main reason that he works with us is because we share a sort of empathetic, non-verbal communication.
So when we vibrate together, the strength of the wave is much, much stronger.
We don't have to sit and plan things out for performance.
Yeah, you feel it instantaneously.
It's all intuitive, yeah.
By instinct.
so what can we expect at the performance tomorrow?
I'll just say that awful cliche. If I'm not doing no.
Great show.
Anger, coated with compassion, delivered through savage electronics.
Sounds like a very good description. Where did that came from?
What it's going to be.
Yeah, well, it's a very good description, I think.
People do find it quite savage, and I always have a strange, part of me is still quite shy and still quite did I use the Australian inflection?
Yeah, almost.
Sorry, we have it's very bad to get up at the end of a sentence. So I'll just rephrase that. I sometimes think that people who are conventional musicians must think that we're appalling because the music we play is almost unlistenable, but in a good way. And generally speaking, always some people walk out if they weren't expecting, if they don't know anything about Coil. But for the people that do know about Coil and that appreciate it, they're pinned to the chair or pinned to the spot where they're standing, and they're totally overcome by the experience. Generally,
enjoying having their feelings rattled.
Yeah, and so I kind of feel embarrassed, but at the same time, I think it's good.
You did it again.
I kind of feel embarrassed.
That's the right.
That's okay. It's okay to be that.
My take on what we're doing in performance at the moment is there's so much noise and so much visual and oral pollution, posters everywhere, and television and radio, and absolutely so many records that I could puke. What we want to do is create a sonic barrage in which people can cocoon themselves for an hour, and sort of like as white noise, will mask all the other sounds. In some way, this is what we want to do with the sound and the vibrations and the light.
I think sometimes you've got to make a lot of noise to be able to appreciate the silence afterwards as well.
It would be quite difficult to sit in a Coil concert and think of a Missy Elliott or Boston.
Yeah. So, it was a way of concentrating people's minds on that. It's putting people in touch with themselves, hopefully, through sound and light. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Will people be able to differentiate between a Merzbow concert and a Coil concert?
Oh, much. Oh, definitely.
And where lies the difference?
Taste.
Okay.
No.
Size. You know what
yeah, well, really, he's like a shredding machine, whereas we're like something else.
I think we may try to hypnotize the crowd.
Yes.
Giving them some sort of drug.
Yes.
Coil makes soul music in the true sense of the word. I think Coil makes soul music in the true sense of the word, where Merzbow, I don't think, he's really interested in that.
And he's a very strange guy, I can say. I interview him and he looks like a scary rabbit, really.
But what he's doing is projecting junk at people. He's just reflecting the stuff that I was talking about. The explosion of images and sound and verbal sound bites and media crap. Whereas we're doing the opposite. We're pushing all that away with our own particular vision of sound and light.
And then comes what?
When white
noise, silence. What is it?
After
you've
that's up to you.
Well, we've all got to look into the silence and see what we find.
Yeah.
Well, it's completely different music, but the title is okay. Silence is the new kind of loud. Silence is the new loud, was it?
Yes.
Silence is the new black.
Okay.
Yeah. And we were touring the last few concerts and the title we've been playing with is "Constant Shallowness Leads to Evil."
Mm-hmm.
And so we're trying to be some sort of antidote to that.
Yeah. Okay, I'm very interested in listening to the concert tomorrow. Yeah. Finally, last but not least, can you comment on the CDs? Some of them, not all, but just the ones that are not so familiar to me. Okay, well, especially this one.
Right.
That's the most important, since that's unknown material.
Thighpaulsandra's EP is the most important one.
Okay, yeah.
Well, this is an EP that we're releasing on Eschaton. It's going to be Eschaton 33, and it's by a guy called Ivan Pavlov, who's a Russian living in Stockholm, and he has a group called Sun, and it's spelled COH, which is the Cyrillic Russian language. And there's 4 tracks on it. Peter did one, which is a version of Murder My Angel by Soft Cell, and Ivan's done a horrible retros 80s disco song, but he's done it in an incredibly good, interesting way. Digital, but not mega type digital. There's this track called Prayer for Russell, which is by Steve Thrower,
Who used to be in
Coil, which is a really good track. In memory of one of his favourite male porn stars. And a track that I did called Health and Deficiency, which is I reached an area of myself, I found a persona in myself that I don't really want to ever bring out again, because it's still carrying this drove me mad for about a month afterwards, seriously. So it's interesting.
That's a very side project, but it has some good things to it.
Yeah. I remember that sentence. Some of us still carry the scars. Some DOA, right?
Could be.
And that's was very intrigued by that sentence. It's somewhere on the record sleeve of Trouble Gristle record.
Could one.
Yeah, Norris.
Okay. Would like to comment on this?
My new EP. That's all I can say about that.
No, no, thank you for the comment.
Can I comment on
Comment on the other one, 'cause that's comment on the
On your album.
yes, because they're both related. You see,
Okay.
so they're related.
Here's my what we think. Honestly, this is a digipack, but we reckon that mankind is going to develop its special tooth
Yeah,
to get it to get into CD packaging.
This one isn't so bad.
I'm also in favor of the digipack, but
Yeah,
Oh, and this is related to this.
yeah,
that's the first EP.
okay. Yeah, you're confident. Okay. Still running? Oh yeah, fine.
Thighpaulsandra is incredibly prolific. So some of his releases are coming through Eschaton, and the first one was the Sumhead EP, which was rushed, unfortunately, so it should have had 3 tracks, but there's 2 long tracks on there. I mean, my vocals are on one of them. And that's extremely interesting. Followed by an extraordinary eclectic and wide, well, eclectic means wide, broad spread album. Spread-eagled album.
The sleeve's very wide as well. It comes up even another one, doesn't it?
All right, there you go.
It's great. The Magician.
Yes.
All right.
I say yes because you wanted a cover that looked like a yes cover.
Yes. You got let's go. It's more like a Led Zeppelin cover. It doesn't look anything like a Roger Dean cover, even though people keep saying it does.
No. This is actually this is an actual
It's a real
place.
yeah.
It's only slightly coloured green there. It's just round the corner here. There's just, if you go around the corner there's some steps and there's some sort of children climbing up. That's sort of where Houses of the Holy was done.
And then a bit higher, there's Jerry Hall.
And Jerry Hall's
But agency,
about 100 yards down the beach.
dragging herself out of the oils.
It looks good.
It's an extraordinary album, and I do recommend you give it a listen.
Okay. I'll plug it.
Yeah. And this is the follow-up EP, the Michel Publicity Window, which is one of the tracks taken from the album.
There's a 32-minute or 27-minute track on there. It contains a 3-minute song in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So the 3-minute song ends up on the EP. It's all one continuous.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Great.
And there's 4 tracks on the EP, and they're sort of
More commercial.
more commercial. Our cleaning lady absolutely loves it.
Well, they were not done to be commercial. They're not done because we do what we like.
Thighpaulsandra is so what's the word? Dexterous. Can do anything basically.
This is a big mixture. This record. There are tracks that are almost classical, and when I say classical,
Avant classical.
yeah, like very Berlioz, Stockhausen kind of direction. And then there are other things that are very intensely electronic, and then there are other things that are almost pop music.
And there's
And then there are other things that are very improvised.
a whole side with Julian Coe.
Yeah, there's a whole side of Julian
That's
Coe.
maybe also a good question. Do you believe that somehow, since you see this all the time, bands changing their kind of music, like a band like Aqua, it's first making chewing gum pop, and then they suddenly change rapidly into like an underground guitar band.
Did they?
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, well, underground guitar band, but also a good example. Yeah, there's some groups that are changing their music style overnight, and really drastically. Would you believe that something would happen in pop music, that you could get, say, compilation albums from one artist in all kinds of direction on?
Sure, it's happened already. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so. That's why I'm asking, because since I think that most of the artists maybe nowadays don't want to stick to one genre altogether, and maybe they don't come up with extra names or something for every project, but just decide to do it on one compilation album, you know? Madonna goes pop and R&B and hard rock on the same album.
Madonna would have liked to have gone Aphex Twin, you know?
Yeah.
You know the thing that she tried to get Aphex Twin to produce her album?
I know, yeah. It refused, I believe.
Yeah, he told her to fuck off. Yeah.
No, it's true. That's true. Yeah. Okay.
But, you know, you mentioned, and this is irrelevant to the conversation really, but, you know, Moby was in Flipper, you know, the American punk band.
Mm-hmm.
So he has a history of, you know, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for a while. Good band, I like Flipper.
Feasted or
Moby.
Oh, now you're in the bitching section.
bacon bitch. No problem.
Tons.
You should have said, we could have. Anyway.
We'll have relatively long.
That one?
That was our third band.
This one, which I'm holding in front of me, is a Coil Presents Time Machines. Well, that's sort of wrong in itself. It's Time Machines live at the Royal Festival Hall, minus the last track, which I don't know why we left that off, because it was Birdsong and it was really nice. And it's so 3 long tracks, which was our first. It was part of the Julian Cope cornucopia.
Mm-hmm.
And strangely enough, he invited us from the dark side, as he says. We people from the dark side were allowed to join his sparkling, spangly universe for a short time, and
We're sent back to hell.
Yeah.
Interest.
Yeah. and this is a sort of record of it,
Okay.
document of it,
I believe I have most important.
minus any overdubs. It's all
That just before you get curious about that, that's a tribute album to us.
Yeah.
And
Sorry, is there any Coil track on there?
no,
What do you feel when you get
see,
when you get
it freaks me out.
Yeah.
I feel like
Step away, or is
no, and then well, I mean, I'm glad that people have the, you know, I'm happy for people to do it.
I'm pleased they've done it, and I'm flattered, but I feel like Leonard Skinner or something that we died in a plane crash.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's strange, huh?
Yeah,
it's really significant. Yeah,
yeah,
second
and the
one,
third
another one's
underway already.
Jesus.
and there's not, they're not even, they're not CDRs, they're probably CDs, you know.
Yeah. I can. Well, somehow it must feel like a tribute, man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm flattered, but
Yeah. Did you listen to this?
No.
No. You don't dare hear, and it's like, I'm not gonna listen to this until I'm
The
mention homework.
the volume 1 actually had some really good stuff on.
yeah,
There's a couple of
it probably has some
yeah.
good things on it. You know, it's just
Don't know any of these artists.
that last one is Ivanhoe we work with on that other,
Thank you, sir.
and there's a few others I've heard of. You know.
On this one.
Well,
Yeah.
Luminous Darkness was the first Cyclope album that we brought out about 2 years ago. And we've got a new... Well, the track we've given you is replaced by Constellation, which is a new track off the next album, which is coming out in September.
Have you got a title?
No title as of yet.
You went to say it.
Bubbling with that one.
Who are Cyclope?
Cyclope's me and Stephen Thrower. And yeah, I mean, we've been working on it for 2 years, and hopefully we'll get this out of our system. Yeah.
So Steve Trower is just one of the people that have worked with Coil for a longer.
He's not just that. No. He's also a writer and a musician in his own right.
Yeah. You're sure? I understand. But there's been, of course, many people that were a part of Coil for a longer or shorter period of time.
Yeah.
Okay, could you comment on maybe might be the most influent person, or isn't there any? It's just different.
Can't say.
Varies throughout.
It would be unfair to say as well.
Yeah, I know that's difficult, but maybe they have all different influence. Maybe you could comment on that. Like Steve Trower maybe did something.
Steve contributed with his belligerence.
Oh, what's that? I don't know. Dutch.
Belligerence is like
obtuseness,
slightly aggressive,
something to fight against and wrestle with, and and
Stephen Louis.
Yeah.
intellectual and discourse. He dissects language he's like sort of cross between Marquis Smith and Wyndham Lewis. You know, sort of.
A lot of discussions.
Yeah. So he is always on the verge of a fist fight, and so the tension was turned into creativity, which was great.
Yeah.
He's a writer as
Yeah.
Yes, he's wrote a wonderful book on
filmmaker Lucio Fulci.
yeah, huge, great, fantastically researched book on Lucio Fulci.
So he's an expert on horror movies, and he publishes a horror magazine as well.
Yeah, Eyeball, called Eyeball.
Kind of, like on kind of very peculiar, avant-garde kind of horror films,
Smash horror,
British all sorts.
which is now becoming a sort of proper, what's the word?
But his magazine, when he started it, like,
what's it sort of
how many years ago, really was one of the first magazines concentrating on a lot of these films that were still very, very obscure then. And since then, a lot of people have kind of taken them up and started writing about them. But a lot of the filmmakers were largely unheard of.
And it really was considered trash then, and sort of the lowest of the low filmmakers, like much worse than John Waters. John Waters was God compared to these people. And now they've become, institution, and people are recognising them for, they become high art.
It'd write about them in a very you wouldn't be writing about them in a trashy way, which most people were.
So talking about films, do you care to comment on any of the soundtracks you did? Is there something really important that you want to share with us?
It was good to work with Derek Jarman.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Derek's finances at the time where we did the Angelic Conversation with him were completely minimal, so we sort of did it in a day. So I wish we'd had much more time and money, and I wish he'd had more time and money to do it. But it was great to work with him on that. And the piece we did for Blue, the film Blue, was his favourite piece in the film, which I found really, really humbling, because he was very ill at the time and with the walking stick, and he was blind, and we were watching a blue screen in the cinema for the thing, and when our piece came up, he sort of stood up and started disco dancing. So that's an endearing image, however.
What do you think of the last movie?
It was
The Shadow, was it? Heb je hem samen gezien?
Blues.
no, as one.
No. In the way?
yeah.
Oh, I'm getting mixed up, sorry.
I'm sorry.
What was it like to work with Ted Barker, the Hellraiser thing?
Frustrating, very frustrating.
And
Yeah,
that was the first lesson we had in the way that Hollywood works, which was things start off very well intentioned and with really good ideas. And in fact, what the story with that was, Clive came to us with a short story that he wanted to make into a film and said, "You'd be great to do some music for this. Could you? This is my story. Will you? Can you give me any guidance, or can you give me any direction or anything?" And we wrote the things that were on that became the CD that we did, and also we showed him lots of references of fetish things and people in chains and being hooked straight to them and stuff, and all of that stuff became.
to be more precise, we had what's the magazine called?
BFIQ.
What's it? Piercing Forum International.
And International Quarterly.
Yeah, and we showed him that, and there was a particular image of a penis with about 30 piercings through it.
Being pulled apart.
Yeah, being pulled apart. Oh, and another one with the penis being split in half. And both of those he acknowledges as that's where the pinhead image came from. And also some of the images that we had on our wall also appear in the film. So, not blaming Clive Barker, but we were kicked off the film for being too scary. They wanted emotional, orchestral music. And bleep me out now if you need to, but this is when we realised that Hollywood was full of cunts. And we don't want to engage with it.
We don't believe that.
Complications with David Lynch.
Peter worked
with David Lynch and on Lost Highway, just for a few days. He was kind of an interesting guy. It struck. He didn't seem totally genuine to me. It struck me that his manner was a way of manipulating other artists to produce what you want, which is fine. And to some extent, directors have to do that. And he had made some very interesting films within his system that generally encourages you to make boring films. He's that's a great testament to his ability. But he seemed like a bit of an odd guy, and not a very genuine to me.
And we're still hanging on for someone who's got the talent and the money and the budget and the willpower to hold on to Coil as music makers for their film, to completion. We're very generous. Student people phone up or email us. Will say, and they say, can we use a certain piece of music that's already recorded? We'll just say yes, go ahead. If there's any money made, then we'll have to make a contract. We got fucked over by Greg Araki several times. He'd use it was like beggars to use some pieces of music in fact, I think 3 of his films. We never saw a penny of it yet. They come out on video and stuff.
Actually, that's not really true. We did do some small amount of money for the Greg Araki films, but one of our conditions was that he would continue to use us when he made films that were properly financed, and he did. So,
and then the soundtrack album comes out, and we're not on that.
But tracks are not on. Yeah, that's another very Hollywood thing, is that they put tracks on a soundtrack album that have nothing to do with the film, simply,
and suddenly
smashing
skins are on it, and Amen are on it and stuff. Yeah. They weren't even in the film,
No music in the film.
Yeah, we all know how this works. Yeah.
So I'm disillusioned, but still hopeful that somebody might come along and say.
At the moment, Hollywood is just as with the same with music videos. It's in the grip of a Tommy Hilfiger phenomenon. And all films, basically, a large proportion of Hollywood films, just want to get you to go to the film because it has some cute young star in it. And the emotions are from a serial packet.
It's essential that we do everything we possibly can with our art to destroy this homogeny that is engulfing the whole bloody world.
And it's a very good end quote. No, but it's true. Absolutely. I know this from experience. I won't go into that, but I know exactly what you're talking about. It hurts inside. It's really something that hurts. Although it should make you angry, you want to attack it, but somehow it just makes you sad.
Yeah. Well, I've decided to attack as well.
Yeah.
But I think that if you go now to a video rental shop, you can walk along the aisles of millions of new films, and they're all boring. None of them have the excitement. When video shops first opened, that just because of random selection and chance, and you could find Mary Poppins next to
Driller
Killer or Cannibal Holocaust or something like that. And some of those things, would have a resonance that were interesting. Even the combination of the two were interesting. But now everything is the same, and
you know what to expect.
And it's boring, and it's going to be boring for the public as well. Sooner or later.
But it's getting like that with music as well.
It's more than boring. It's dangerous, and it's withering people's souls. It's destructive.
And it's terrible. Maybe I'm foolish enough to think that the public actually are aware of this, and if they had the choice of choosing things that were stranger, maybe they would actually pay for them.
Okay, but what do you think about? There's a website. What was it called again? With all this rotten www.rotting.com, and it's just most awful pictures of people that were under trains and that were. So there's even a photograph of a guy who got his head stuck into a motor, it's all smashed open. This page, there's no banners, it's not commercial. It gets the same amount of hits like the Financial Times every day. So it's like, I don't know how much, but many visitors. What does that tell you?
I think it's people trying to shock themselves enough into feeling alive.
Yes, I think so too.
I think it's similar to none of the people doesn't go out to the Faces of Death videos.
Yeah. I have a slightly mixed feeling about that. I think it's good that, people can see that stuff. And, and I think it's much better that it's available But I think it would be better if it was available in the street rather than having to go out and find it.
Yeah, it's like in Mexico, as they have a good attitude today. You buy the paper, and all that stuff is in the paper. It's on the newsstands, and
It's not secret.
and it's no,
Like a secret.
yeah, it's not like you're going to go and jerk off over it. It's there. Death. It's on. There's dead bodies on the street. There's dead bodies in the paper. Same in Thailand. They have the same. Actually, this thing I'm wearing is a thing called Potek Tung, which is that they collect the bodies from the streets, and the more bodies they collect, the more points they get for Buddha. So they have this attitude.
Yeah, and not the secrecy around.
No,
But there is a but for me, and I think that people, I think actually that continually stimulating the part of your brain that is stimulated by those pictures, actually it's deleterious. It has a bad effect. It is the same, because ultimately it's the same as taking drugs that actually don't take you to an interesting place. It causes distress.
If you present death as pornography,
Which those photos do.
Yeah. then that is wrong.
It gets out.
Yeah. Then you become compulsive. Or people might have a tendency to become compulsive.
Reaches up and the total reaches back into you. Yeah.
Which is not to say that you need to avoid those things, but you need to be exposed to them in the context of life and in the context of
And have it explained.
an ongoing affirming situation.
Yeah.
We think that that our last two records, Music to Play in the Dark, Volume 1 and 2, are very, clear in the sense that the darkness is something to embrace, and it's a place that is not necessarily a dangerous place, but it could be a place of safety. It's just a place that's not, exposed to the Christian glare.
But I have this concept that Christianity wants to light the world up. Literally, the light of Christ is street lighting. Because and it's orange. The future's orange. Because Christians think that, and the Western thing is like, if it's lit up, it's safe. And that's absolutely not true. I think the darkness is the safest place,
But they're frightened of the darkness because they can't control what's in the darkness because it's not exposed.
It's this ridiculous simplistic darkness equals evil, light equals good, and it's just not true. Nature just proves it's not true.
Mm-hmm. And most animals feel very safe in the dark.
Exactly. And I feel safe in the dark, and I am an animal.
Sure. No, but since this is in contrast, of course, to Hollywood, which is trying to bring you the bright, shiny world where everyone is happy and okay, and then you see the success of a site like www.rotten.com, which actually, I must say, is not. It doesn't come across as a porno kind of site. I know these sites still there's horror and it's the axis, on black. No, it's just white, and just links to the pictures. And so if you open the page first, there's no shocking photo on the front page. And they do this deliberately. Say they don't want to be a site which is in there for the shocking potential. Since if it would be the case, they would put
Sci-fi is hypocritical to me.
It's more or less,
Just a bit more upper class.
But they can make heaps of money, If you just put one banner on there, they're gone, But they don't do that just to keep their goal clear. They say, I don't know these guys, But
Well, I'll have to have a look.
Oh yeah, I was intrigued just by.
We went through a time when we had it, and we still have a huge collection of
Forensic
material and autopsy videos and stuff like that, and inevitably you come across videos. There's a series of videos called "A Man Behind the Sun," which is a Chinese sort of a horror. It was supposed to be like a.
I've got to be correct about this. It's the man behind the sun. Yeah.
And it's actually, it's interesting to see it as part of a greater understanding of what humanity is, but it makes you feel bad. And why do you want to look at that stuff if it makes you feel bad?
So we know this too. We've rented a couple of faces of that.
Yeah. Yes. Most of those are fake, I think, but
Or maybe it gets a
Mostly on the later stuff, but
That might be an stuff.
yeah, the later stuff is fake. But the first videos that were banned pretty quickly, we started to look at it, and we were drinking a little. It was just like, okay, let's have it, we can handle this. And say halfway the second movie, we got things like somehow. So it when it drafts inside somehow.
It doesn't actually matter very much if it's fake or not.
I think it's more to do with actually this stuff being not hidden, but being shown in newspapers, like you were saying. I think it's foolish to hide it totally. I mean, you don't really want to see this stuff because it's deeply distressing.
Yeah.
And it does affect you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's very real and it's all around us. But it's just how it's presented to you, and it's,
And one part it makes you feel alive. You feel the edges of your being somehow. But on the other hand, what you're saying, if you take a good look at it and look too long, and it grabs inside, then it becomes it gets you where it doesn't.
Well, hopefully you'll feel the edges of your being a Coil concept. In a more positive way.
I'll comment afterwards. Yeah. Okay. I was looking at my clock, and it's 5 minutes past.
It's dinner time.
Dinner time. Yeah. I have to go.
20 to 8.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, thank you so much.
I hope we can.
Oh yeah, I need to do a lot of prompts. Come on, don't worry. There's no background music. No, really great. Thank you so much.